Would you like to breathe easy while wearing your face mask? Would you like to breathe easy and be able to talk at the same time? Well, if you would like to do all those things, breathe easy and talk while wearing a face mask, then this, my friends, is your tutorial. Stick around. Hi friends, Tracy here from the Sewing Channel. Welcome back, and if you're new here, welcome. Today's mask tutorial is all about the Breathe Easy mask. You might be asking yourself, what's wrong with the other masks that we've sewn so far? Absolutely nothing. This is just something new. What is a Breathe Easy mask? All a Breathe Easy mask is, the room area above your nose and your mouth is pumped up, so to speak, so that you're able to talk and breathe easier. Now, how do we make a Breathe Easy mask? Well, first of all, we're not going to do a filter pocket. I have something new for you today. It's this stuff right here. Now, this is polypropylene non-woven spun, just like the last stuff, the olefin. Where the olefin was an insert, this one is a sew-in. It's that strong that you can wash it. It's not going to rip and tear easily. The other thing that's new is this right here. This is a zip tie. Just a simple zip tie that you can find anywhere. That is what makes this on the edge of that nose to be able to stand out so that you're able to breathe and talk freely. That's all it is. There will be a free pattern to this mask. It's a new mask pattern. In order to fit this right here, I had to redesign my mask. So, a new pattern down below. It's a lot longer, so it's going to fit from nose to chin. Enough talking already. Let's get busy. When your fabric is all cut out, the outer fabric should be a little bit bigger than the inner lining fabric. The fabric that's towards your face should be smaller. The outer fabric needs to be bigger so that we can put a French seam in it. We are going to put 4 separate darts, one on each mask wing, the inner lining and the outer fabric. I pressed the middle there so I would know where the middle is. From that crease, you want to go over 1/4 of an inch and make a mark right at the top there. And then you want to go from that top edge down and make a mark that's 1 inch. And then we are going to connect those 2 dots. And see, it's a half a dart. So now what we're going to do is flip it over and we're going to do the same thing. Mark 1/4 inch from that crease and then 1 inch down, mark it, and then make a line connecting those dots. We're going to get some prep work done for later. What we're going to do is fold over toward the wrong side of the fabric each of those wings about 1/2 inch and just press a light crease in them. It'll make more sense later. Now with wrong sides together, yep, wrong sides, not right sides together, wrong sides together, sew about 1/8 inch, very scantly, right around that curve, just like you see me do here. It should look something just like this. Okay, now it's time to get conventional. Go ahead and put right sides together. But give it a little bit of a press first, putting the seam allowance whichever way that it wants to go, just keeping everything nice and neat as we sew. So with right sides together, we are going to sew 1/4 inch seam allowance, and ultimately we are encasing that 1/8 inch that we just made on the sewing machine. And it'll make a nice little sleeve for our boning or our zip tie to go in. It should look something just like this. Here's a look at the inside, and that actually is a little tubing that's going to encase our zip tie. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and put it on this ham, and we are going to go ahead and give it a good press. If you would like to make this exact sewing mask ham that I used in today's tutorial, I actually do have a video on how to make it, and I'll link it right above here. Now let's work on the darts. So we're going to fold those right sides together and get it in that position where we only see half of the dart. And then you are going to start at that 1/4 inch. You can backstitch right there, but do not backstitch at the point. When you get to the point after you've followed that angled line that you made down to that point, you're going to pull your threads away just like you see me do and cut them in a way that you have 2 long tails left. Now with those 2 tails, we are going to tie a couple knots, and you're not going to be able to tie a knot if they're too short. And we want our dart to stay in. We don't want it to unravel. And here what you see me do is just tying the knots at the ends of those points. And you want to do all 4 wings just like that. Now on the inside of all of your dart areas, you're going to go ahead and give them a good press so that they lay nice and flat to one side or the other. Each wing should look just like this, nicely pressed. Your sew-in filter should be the same size essentially as your inner lining fabric, except with the wings chopped off, if that makes sense. Now what we're going to do is connect that filter with the inner lining fabric. So this is how you do it. You fold them together just like this, and then what we're going to do is sew around that curve, sewing them together at the same time. Now you are using a 1/4 inch seam allowance here, and right sides are together. It should look something just like this. Now in order to get the best curve that we possibly can on our mask, we must use a ham in order to do that. Now what we're going to do is press those seam allowances on that inner lining to one side, and then we're going to just press it on our ham so that it gives it that beautiful curve. And then what I did, which you don't have to do, is I did top stitch down the center. Now you don't have to do that, and I did leave that sewing part out, but you can if you want to. Now you never want to iron right on top of the polypropylene filters, the spun material. So what I did was I just laid some scrap fabric over it and just gave it a good press that way. Now on to the zip tie part, or the boning part, but honestly zip ties are cheaper, so I definitely recommend that instead of real boning. But what we're going to do essentially is slide it through that tubing that we made earlier, that French seam, but we need to make sure that it's short enough to clear the 1/4 inch seam allowances at the top of the mask and the bottom of the mask. And that's what I'm doing right here, is just measuring it out. Once you have the size that you need, you're going to go ahead and open that outer fabric up so that you can see the inside. Find that little casing hole, and the pointy part of the zip tie, you're going to go ahead and just feed it right through the mask, just like you see me do, until you feel it come all the way to the other end. This really is such a great idea. I wish I would have thought of it, but I didn't. I first saw this idea on Gail Colmore's channel. I hope I'm saying that right, Gail, so we want to thank her for that. Now on to the nose piece. With your scrap fabric at about 3 inches by 5 inches, I believe, and your 5-inch length foam, now it's only a 1/2 inch in width because I cut it in half to take some of the bulk down. We're going to lay some heat bond on that, and then some 4 inches long worth of floral wire. We're going to sandwich that together, and then we are going to give it a hot press, and it's going to stick all together. We use the heat bond in there to stick everything together so it doesn't shift when we sew, and we definitely don't want it to shift while it's in our mask. We want it to do what it's supposed to do. Here I'm showing you on the end there, you need to come off about a 1/4 inch when you sew all the way around that wire, just so that in case the wire does get loose, it doesn't want to have so much tension that it pokes right through the fabric. So essentially just sew right around, leaving some space on all sides of that wire. Up to the foam part, just cut some excess off of the sides, but don't cut into the foam too much. We only need a 1/4 inch seam allowance on our nose piece right here on those raw edges. So I'm just showing you with the ruler, and I have a little bit too much, so I'm going to go ahead and trim that down so it's closer to a 1/4 inch seam. With that raw edge seam allowance facing upward, you're going to go ahead and bend that wire right to the middle, and then you're going to snip into the seam allowance so it releases the tension around that bend so it's not so tight. This is the part that I get wrong sometimes. Take the squishy side, the foamy side, the foam part, not the wire side, the foamy part, and put it toward the back of the wrong side of that fabric. You want that foam side to hit the top of your nose. Sometimes I get it mixed up and flip it around and I end up with wire at my nose, and it makes me so mad that I messed up. So don't mess that part up. Put a few clips in the top of that nose piece, connecting it to the inner lining, the part that's going to go on your face. And then you're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance connecting them together. When I sew this step, I always do back stitches right along the sides of that foam, connecting it to the inner lining. That way it doesn't flip-flop during wash time. You want to take your time on this part and get as close as you can to that 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I use a zipper foot to do that, and you should too. Now take your comfort elastic, and this comfort elastic that I'm using is the one that they use in the hospitals. It is very soft and very comfortable. But what you want to do on all 4 of those ends is make little knots on all 4 ends. Then set the elastic aside, and then I want you to line up with right sides together both of your seams at the top of that nose area, and go ahead and put some clips in there. Remember those 1/2 inch creases that we made on the wings earlier? Now we're going to use them. With those right sides together, you're going to put the loop part into the mask, just like you see me putting mine. The knots are going to be toward the edge of the wing. That crease that you made, that knot needs to be on the other side of that crease. That's going to ensure that those knots are inside of our mask in the end where we want them to be, and the loops will be on the outside. Now I'm going to lay some heat bond on there to help keep that from shifting until we can sew it. Lay the other piece of fabric right on top of it and give it a hot press on both sides of the fabric. We're going to do the same thing to the other side. Lay the knots hanging over that creased area with the loop going in toward the mask. We also have to remember though to keep away from the top and the bottom of the mask where there's a 1/4 inch seam allowance, because we're going to be sewing those together there. Lay your heat bond over the knots, lay the other piece on top of that, and then we are going to give it a hot press and it'll all stick together. Now you don't have to mark this on your fabric. I'm just showing you for a visual. I have an arrow going up toward the top there. That's a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I have an arrow going to the edge of those wings. That's a 1/2 inch seam allowance. That is, you have 2 different seam allowances in today's mask. A 1/4 inch and a 1/2 inch on the ends. When we sew around our mask, we need to leave an opening so that we can turn our mask right side out. So I'm just pointing right there, showing you that that's the spot I'm going to leave open. So I'm going to start just on the other side of the bottom of the mask and go all the way around, keeping in mind though a 1/4 inch seam allowance on the top and the bottom and a 1/2 inch seam allowance on both ends or both wings. Take your time and be accurate when you turn the corners after you've done the 1/2 inch seam allowance. This will ensure that you have an even amount on both wing areas when you're all done. Go ahead and trim off any excess up by the nose to get rid of all that bulkiness. And then you're going to go ahead and turn it right side out. Use something pointy to go ahead and push out the corners, but don't use anything sharp because you might cut right through it. And just make sure everything is finger pressed real nice. Put all the fabric where it needs to go and just get ready to give it a nice press. Go ahead and press that opening where you turn the mask right side out and give it a press, and then take it to your sewing machine and give it a straight stitch just to close it up, and it should look something just like this. Take the time to fuss over your mask a little bit, put it on the ham, give it good presses here and there. You can take the extra step if you'd like to, like I did, and put a couple top stitches where you see me pointing. Just, it connects the mask, both the front and the back together. It just keeps everything together. The loops were still too long for me, so I went ahead and just tied loose slip knots on the ends, and then my mask fit perfectly. Now we can talk and breathe all at the same time. Until next time on the Sewing Channel, take care.